So after going over this week's module on gene and environment interplay, the three main groups that Beaver states are important to look at is first the gene-environment interaction, which is the effect of the environment depending on the presence of genotypes, and the effect of the genotype depends on the presence of the environment. Specifically for this one, I kind of want to focus on the MAOA gene. I do this because there's a lot of polymorphisms that Beaver does cover in his chapter, and so I kind of want to keep it a little bit simpler for the sake of this discussion. According to Beaver, Caspi and his colleagues conducted the first study on gene-environment interaction, and that they, during the study, they measured gene and measured the environment. The study hypothesized that a polymorphism in the promoter region of the MOA gene would affect the response to childhood maltreatment. Caspi and his team also hypothesized that alleles that code for the same production of low MAOA activity would be associated with displaying antisocial phenotypes. After their research was conducted, the analysis revealed that alleles coded for the production of low MAOA activity increased antisocial phenotypes for males. And during this study, they kind of focused on males more than they did females. On page 99, the chart indicates that with the polymorphism of MAOA in the environment where maltreatment is present, the phenotypic outcome would result in antisocial phenotypes and conduct disorder. By focusing on the MOA polymorphism and different environment, researchers also noticed that when neuropsychological defects are present in the environment, the phenotypic outcome can result in delinquency and low self-control. And Kevin Beaver also draws on recent studies that have shown the effect of risk alleles versus plasticity alleles. Here, Beaver states that the alleles for certain genetic polymorphisms would not be viewed as risk alleles, rather than they should be viewed as plasticity alleles. Here, plasticity alleles specify how malleable each person is. The more plasticity alleles that the individual carries, the more susceptible they are to environment, whether that environment is good or bad. He also states on page 99 that according to all of these explanations, without exposure to criminogenic environments, individuals will be most affected by their genetic predispositions. So we can kind of see here that there are different alleles that and chromosomal variances that can really have an effect on how antisocial behaviors or impulsivity and all of these different things can arise. So second, we are looking at the gene-environment correlation, RGE. Here, this group kind of attempts to capture the process by which genotype structures differential exposure to environments is studied. Under this category, Beaver wants us to understand that virtually every environment, from parental socialization to peer interactions, is partly influenced by genetic factors. And he kind of gives this to three different types of RGEs. We have passive, which are the result of biological parents passing along genotype and environment to their children. Evocative, which arise from the genotype eliciting certain reactions from the environment, and these reactions are positively correlated to genetic predispositions. And then we have active RGEs, which refers to the integral role that the genotypes play in the selection of environments that are compatible with genetic tendencies and that allow optimal genetic expression. Each subgroup elicits different reactions. For example, passive RGEs have the ability to pass on aggressive behavior and low self-regulation. Beaver also uses the example that aggressive and abusive parents are more likely to pass on genetic predispositions for antisocial tendencies. So if you're growing up in a household where the parent is abusive and aggressive during the early stages of childhood, that can affect them in the long run and inevitably they will inherit antisocial phenotypes. I'm probably going to pronounce his name right, but Laramie Challant, I don't know, and et al. Study the passive gene environment correlation. So they're talking about heritability and temperament that can emerge early in a child's life. They draw on substantial non-behavior research that shows consistent associations between the family environment and the children's temperament on page 52. Different aspects of the home, such as chaos, physical environment, are used to measure the child's outcome without using genetically informed designs that biosocial researchers use. Their research is kind of interesting because it attempts to measure the aspect of the common family environment on the child's temperament. So when you live in a house where it's chaotic, it has little to no structure, it has and homes that have high levels of noise, confusion, or disorganization provide the structuring for increased behavioral problems. So bad parenting doesn't really come in there. That kind of trumps it. And then the physical home environment, such as the layout, size, safety, and the availability of basic necessities and materials also have a big impact on how the child's temperament will become. So how I think about this is when you are growing up in a group home, you guys are all in very tight quarters, and what's yours is yours. You don't really want anybody else touching it. So, basic things like having a phone or having a bed to sleep in, those become kind of that person's possessions. And if those are taken away, then anger and aggression can be a way for them to cope with that. So they conclude that children with high effortful control had less chaotic home environments, and children with high extroversion surgency had chaotic home environments. Third and final, epigenetics, this is where the human genome consists of all genes contained on the 23 chromosomes. I think here researchers are looking at the epigenome, which consists of chemical markers that are situated along the strand of DNA. These chemical markers affect gene activity because they alter the ability for DNA to be duplicated to RNA, and that is on Beaver, page 111. This is a little bit, for me, it was a far more advanced approach to understanding gene-environment interaction, but it's definitely necessary to understand gene-environment interplay. The epigenome controls some of the expressions of the human genome and is also partially responsible for producing phenotypes. So Beaver breaks it down. Beaver breaks down the main points of epigenetics into 4 ways. First, modifications that can alter gene activity by turning genes on and off. The result of this is that pretty much if you have 2 people who have the same alleles, they can react differently in any given environment, in the same environment. And second, modifications can occur in response to the environments that are experienced from conception to death. So criminologists believe that there are very important developmental time frames that an individual can become vulnerable to environmental influence. These can be prenatal environments, perinatal environments, and infancy and early childhood. Epigenetic modifications can be inherited. The environment may have the ability to change the epigenome, and that can be passed along through generations if care is not sought. And fourth, since epigenetic modifications can be changed in said environment, they are able to be reversed. So how I think about this is that if somebody has experienced some type of trauma in their childhood or even later in life, we see a lot of PTSD. The individual can be prescribed medications such as Prozac or SSRIs to not reverse those symptoms, but help regulate what they could experience, like not their activity, but help regulate the individual and for them to be more active in their daily lives.